Calm, early sunlight spread across the wide-open ranch, touching the fences, the barns, and the quiet fields with a warm glow. It was the kind of morning that made the place look peaceful and steady, as if nothing in the world could ever disturb it. But inside the big ranch house, things were far from peaceful. Harlan Reeves, the owner of the Reeves Ranch, had been awake since before dawn. He moved slowly these days, not because he was lazy, but because his body reminded him, more often than he liked, that he was not young anymore. His knees hurt when he climbed the stairs, and he felt tired even on mornings when he slept well. It was a quiet reminder that time was catching up with him. Harlan was a man who believed in order, planning, and keeping the future secure. For more than 40 years, he had built the ranch into one of the most respected in the region. He had raised cattle, bought land, and worked through storms and dry seasons. He had made hard choices, but always with the idea that the ranch should survive long after him. And now, as he rubbed his tired hands together while standing by the kitchen window, watching the ranch wake up, he knew he needed to make another important decision, one that involved his son, Caleb. Caleb Reeves had a gentle spirit, a quiet nature, and a deep love for the ranch. He worked hard every day and knew almost every part of the land as if it were a close friend. But Caleb was also young, thoughtful, and sometimes too patient. He was the kind of man who waited for things to happen, instead of pushing forward. Harlan admired his son's good heart. But he worried that Caleb was not ready to take over the ranch, not without a partner who could stand beside him, help him, support him, and build a family. That morning, Harlan decided it was time to talk to him. He waited in the kitchen until Caleb came in, brushing dust from his jeans. The young man looked surprised to see his father sitting at the table instead of starting his morning rounds. "Morning, Pa," Caleb said with a warm smile, reaching for a cup of coffee. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Harlan answered, waving for his son to sit. "I've been thinking." Those words made Caleb pause. Whenever his father started a sentence like that, it usually meant something serious was coming. Harlan wasn't a man who wasted words. Caleb took the seat across from him and waited. Harlan cleared his throat, searching for the right way to begin. "Son," he said slowly, "this ranch won't run itself forever. And I won't be around to guide it like I used to. You know that." Caleb's face softened. "Pa, you're still strong. You're still—" "I'm older," Harlan interrupted gently. "And I need to make sure this place stays in good hands. Your hands. You're the one who will lead this ranch someday. But you can't do it alone. Under 17. You're hand Potter. I'm older 1917. I'm older 1917. Under 17. Caleb frowned slightly, unsure what his father meant. Harlan leaned forward. "You need a partner. A wife. Someone who will help you build the future of this ranch." Caleb blinked, taken by surprise. He had expected a talk about cattle numbers or repairs. Not this. "I'm not saying you get married tomorrow," Harlan continued. "But I want you to choose someone. A good woman. Someone from one of the local families. Someone who knows ranch life and can support you." Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to respond. Marriage had not been on his mind, not because he didn't want it someday, but because he had always believed it should happen naturally, not as a duty. Harlan watched his son's expression carefully. There are good families around here. The Holts, the Bennetts, the McLarens. Their daughters are educated, strong, and respectable. Any one of them could be a fine match. Caleb shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Harlan sighed, softening his tone. "Caleb, you're a grown man now. You need someone to stand beside you. A rancher's life is full of responsibility, and it helps to have a good woman who understands that." Caleb finally found his voice. "Pa, shouldn't I choose someone because I love her? Not because it makes sense on paper?" Harlan nodded slowly. "Love is a fine thing. son, but it grows stronger when the ground beneath it is steady. You need someone who can help you keep this place running. A marriage built on respect and teamwork is worth just as much as a marriage built on romance. Caleb looked down into his coffee, unsure how to feel. He respected his father deeply. Harlan had built his life around responsibility and strength, and Caleb admired that. But the idea of choosing a bride based on convenience made his chest feel tight. He wanted something more honest, more meaningful. Harlan noticed his son's worry but continued gently. I'm not telling you who to marry. I'm just giving you a push. I want you to think seriously about it. About your future. The ranch's future. And the family we've built here. Caleb nodded slowly. He knew arguments wouldn't change his father's mind. Harlan wasn't trying to control him. He was trying to protect the ranch, protect their legacy. But still, something inside Caleb resisted the idea of choosing a wife as if he were selecting cattle for auction. As the silence stretched between them, Caleb's thoughts drifted out to the barn, to the horses he needed to feed, and the quiet presence he often found there, a presence that made him feel calm in ways he didn't fully understand. But he shook the thought away quickly. Lena was just a stable girl. A hard-working, quiet, humble young woman who usually stayed out of everyone's way. She wore old clothes, kept to herself, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. She didn't fit into the world Harlan imagined for him. She wasn't from a powerful ranch family. She didn't own land. Really, she had nothing at all. At least, nothing the world considered important. Caleb straightened in his chair. His father was looking at him, waiting. I'll think about it, Caleb said finally. Harlan nodded in relief, as if a heavy weight had shifted off his shoulders. Good. That's all I ask. Caleb stood and pushed his chair back gently. I should get to the morning chores. Go on then, Harlan said, waving him toward the door. But keep what I said in your mind. Caleb nodded and walked out into the bright morning, the cool breeze carrying the smell of hay and fresh earth. The ranch buzzed with movement workers greeting each other. Horses snorting softly in the barn. The distant sound of cattle shifting in the pastures. Caleb breathed deeply, trying to steady himself. He knew his father meant well. He knew the ranch needed stability. But he also knew that choosing a bride wasn't something he could do just because he was told to. Life shouldn't be built like a business deal. As he stepped into the barn, the soft sound of a broom sweeping greeted him. Lena was there, brushing the floor with her usual quiet focus. Her hair was tied back, her clothes worn and dusty, but her movements were steady, gentle, and full of purpose. She didn't see him yet. She was humming softly to one of the horses, calming it as she worked. Caleb paused in the doorway, watching her for a moment without understanding why. All he knew was that the world felt calmer around her. He cleared his throat lightly and stepped forward to begin his chores, carrying with him the heavy weight of his father's expectation and the confusing spark of a feeling he had not yet begun to understand. The barn was always quiet early in the morning, filled only with soft sounds, the shuffle of hooves, the gentle breathing of horses, and the faint rustle of hay. It was the kind of quiet that made a person feel safe, almost hidden from the world. And for Lena Carter, that quiet was her comfort. It was the one place where she felt she belonged. Lena had lived on the Reeves Ranch for years, ever since she was a teenager. Before that, she had drifted from one place to another, never staying long enough to be remembered. She had no family, no savings, and no special place to call home until Harlan Reeves offered her work at the ranch. It wasn't a grand job, mostly cleaning stalls, feeding animals, and helping with the horses, but for Lena, it was more than enough. It gave her a roof overhead, food to eat, and a life that felt steady. Although the ranch workers knew her, they didn't know her well. She spoke little, kept her eyes lowered most of the time, and moved quietly through the barns like a soft breeze. Her clothes were usually old and patched, her boots worn thin, and her hair always tied back in a simple braid. She never tried to stand out. Maybe because she had learned long ago that blending in was easier. But despite her quiet ways, there was something gentle and natural about her. The horses trusted her instantly, and even the most nervous colt relaxed at her touch. The ranch hands often said she had a special gift with animals, one she didn't even realize she had. That morning, as Lena swept the barn aisle, she hummed softly without noticing. The horses recognized her voice and leaned their heads over the stall doors to watch her. She smiled at one of them and paused to gently stroke its neck. Moments like these made her forget everything else. Her uncertain past, her loneliness, her lack of family. Here, she felt useful. Here, she felt seen, even if only by the animals. She didn't hear Caleb at first when he entered the barn. He stood near the doorway, watching her with quiet curiosity. Caleb had seen Lena hundreds of times, but recently he found himself noticing her more than before. Maybe it was the way she worked, with so much care and steadiness. Or maybe it was because she never asked for anything, never tried to impress anyone, and never pretended to be someone she wasn't. Caleb didn't know what it was exactly. But something about her drew his attention, like a gentle pull. Finally, Lena looked up and saw him. She blinked in surprise and quickly stepped aside, lowering her gaze. "Oh, good morning," she said softly, almost shyly. "Mornin', Lena," Caleb replied, giving her a small smile. "You're up early as always." Her cheeks warmed slightly, though she kept sweeping. "There's always something to do." He nodded, stepping forward to begin feeding the horses. For a few minutes, the two worked side by side, in comfortable silence. The only sounds were the rustling of hay, the animals' gentle movements, and the rhythmic scrape of Lena's broom. Caleb found himself glancing at her from time to time. She moved with purpose and confidence, despite her quiet nature. There was no laziness in her steps, and no complaint in her eyes. She worked as though the ranch were her own. After several minutes, he finally spoke again. "You take good care of this barn." Lena paused mid-sweep, surprised. Compliments were rare for her, especially from someone like Caleb. She looked up for a moment, unsure if he was teasing or simply being polite. "Thank you," she said softly. "I try." "You do more than try," he insisted gently. "This place runs smoother because of you." Her heart fluttered at the words, though she didn't show it. Instead, she looked down again and resumed, sweeping. "I just want to help," she murmured. Caleb smiled to himself. That was exactly the kind of person she was, humble, hardworking, and unaware of her own worth. As they worked, a few ranch hands entered the barn, greeting Caleb but barely acknowledging Lena. She didn't mind. Being overlooked had become normal to her. She had grown used to fading into the background. But Caleb noticed the way people passed her by without a second glance, and a small part of him felt something tighten inside. It didn't seem fair. Lena moved toward one of the stalls to check on a young mare that had been restless the day before. She spoke to the horse in a low, calming voice, running her hand along its neck. The mare's breathing slowed, and it gave a soft nudge toward her arm. Caleb watched the interaction with quiet amazement. Lena had a way of understanding animals that he had never seen in anyone else. "You're good with her," Caleb said as he approached. Lena gently brushed the mare's side. "She's just nervous. Sometimes she needs a little extra time. You make it look easy." She shook her head. "It isn't easy, but it's natural. Animals don't ask for much. They just want to feel safe." First, Caleb leaned against the stall door, studying her. "I think people are the same." Lena paused at that, her hand resting on the mare's coat. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she looked slightly away, as if unsure what to say or how to accept the softness in his voice. For a moment, the barn felt different, quieter, almost warm with unspoken thoughts. Lena finally stepped back from the stall. "I should keep working," she said gently, her voice calm but slightly unsure. Caleb nodded, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. Of course. But as she moved away, he couldn't help watching her again. There was something about her that made him think she carried stories she rarely spoke about. She wasn't just a stable girl in old clothes. She was someone with depth, kindness, and quiet strength. Later that afternoon, when the sun was high and the air warm, Caleb found himself crossing paths with Lena again. She was carrying a heavy bucket of feed, struggling slightly under the weight. He quickly moved toward her. "Here, let me help you with that," he offered. "Oh, it's all right," she said quickly, though her arms trembled a little. "I insist," Caleb replied, gently taking the bucket from her hands. Her fingers brushed against his briefly, and she pulled them back quickly, almost startled. For someone used to staying invisible, even small kindnesses felt unexpected, almost confusing. "Thank you," she said after a moment, her voice soft. "Anytime," he replied, carrying the bucket with ease. "You shouldn't have to do the heaviest tasks alone." She smiled a little, the expression faint, but warm. "I'm used to it." Caleb looked at her with genuine concern. Being used to something doesn't always make it right. Lena didn't know how to respond to that. No one had ever said such a thing to her before. She had lived so long believing she deserved nothing more than hard work and quiet corners. Hearing Caleb speak with kindness felt unfamiliar good, but unfamiliar. As the day went on, Lena continued her chores with renewed energy. But she found herself thinking about Caleb more than she expected. His kindness, his gentle tone, the way he didn't look through her, but actually looked at her. It made her feel something she had not felt in a long time. Noticed. Meanwhile, Caleb struggled to focus on his own work. His father's words from earlier that morning kept echoing in his mind. He needed to choose a bride, a suitable woman, from a respected family, someone with status. But as he watched Lena move quietly around the barn, speaking softly to the horses, working with dedication and grace, he wondered why his heart didn't seem to care about any of those expectations. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the barn windows, casting a warm glow on Lena's face as she brushed one of the horses. Caleb felt a small, surprising warmth inside his chest. He didn't yet understand what it meant. He didn't know where it would lead. All he knew was that the world felt a little more peaceful when she was near. And without realizing it fully, a choice had already begun forming in his heart long before he would have the courage to speak it aloud. The days that followed Harlan's conversation with Caleb moved quietly, but inside Caleb's mind, nothing felt quiet at all. He woke early each morning, worked through every chore, and tried to focus on the long list of tasks the ranch always demanded. But no matter how hard he tried, one thought kept returning to him. His father expected him to choose a bride. Every time he remembered those words, his chest tightened. It wasn't that Caleb disliked the idea of marriage. He simply wanted it to happen naturally. He wanted to choose someone because his heart pointed him there, not because it was the practical choice. He believed life was meant to be shared with someone who understood him, someone who brought peace into his days. The problem was that his father already had several young women in mind. Women from well-known ranch families, raised with fine manners and clean boots. Girls who wore dresses that never had a loose stitch and spoke as if their futures were already perfectly planned. They were kind enough, but none of them felt real to Caleb. They felt distant, polished, and so unlike the life he lived every single day. But even as his father pushed him toward these suitable options, Caleb's thoughts often drifted toward Lena, quiet, humble, unnoticed Lena. He didn't understand why. She was nothing like the girls his father considered suitable. She worked in old clothes, kept to herself, and rarely spoke unless she needed to. On paper, she didn't fit into any list of perfect choices. Yet when Caleb saw her working gently with the horses or heard her soft laugh when she fed the playful colt, something inside him warmed. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply existed with quiet strength, and that honesty drew him in. Still, Caleb tried to push those thoughts aside. His father's expectations weighed heavily on him, and he knew he needed to at least appear open to meeting the young women from the neighboring ranches. One evening, Harlan organized a small gathering at the ranch house. A few families from around the area were invited for dinner and conversation. Caleb dressed neatly and tried to look ready, but his heart wasn't in it. The Bennetts arrived first, their daughter Grace smiling politely. She was pretty and well-mannered, and she seemed interested in Caleb. She asked him questions about the ranch, about his work, about the horses. Her voice was calm, and her posture straight, as if she had practiced the art of conversation many times. Caleb answered politely, but his thoughts wandered. Every smile he gave felt slightly forced. Every word felt like he was trying to fit into a mold he didn't belong in. Later, the McLarens arrived. Their daughter Sarah joined the group, cheerful and confident. She talked about her hobbies, her dreams, her friends. She was lively and kind, but she spoke so much that Caleb barely found room to reply. As the evening continued, Caleb realized something important. None of these conversations felt natural. No matter how friendly the girls were, something inside him remained untouched. His heart stayed quiet. Meanwhile, outside the ranch house, Lena walked toward the barn, unaware of the gathering. She always worked late, making sure the horses were well fed before the night settled in. She didn't know about the dinner or the families visiting. Even if she had known, she wouldn't have imagined that any of it concerned her. Inside the house, Caleb felt the pressure growing heavier. His father watched him with hopeful eyes, clearly evaluating how well the young women might fit into their future. But Caleb felt an uncomfortable distance widening between who he was and who he was expected to become. When the evening finally ended and the families left, Caleb stepped outside to breathe the fresh night air. The sky was deep blue, filled with stars, and the ranch looked calm under their light. He walked toward the barn without thinking, drawn by a quiet need for peace. As he reached the barn, he saw a soft glow inside. Lena was there, gently brushing one of the horses. She looked tired, but peaceful. Her presence had a calmness that made the world feel slower and softer. Caleb stepped into the barn. Lena looked up, surprised to see him. "You're here late," she said softly. "So are you," he replied with a small smile. She shrugged, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "The horses settle better when I check on them again at night." Caleb leaned against the stall door, watching her in the gentle lantern light. "Do you ever rest, Lena?" She paused, thinking about it. "I rest when everything is done. It feels better that way. Everything I've been giverbly. I rest on Rublum." Caleb admired her honesty. She didn't pretend to be anything she wasn't. After a moment, Lena asked, "Was there something happening at the ranch house?" "The lights were bright tonight." Caleb sighed lightly. "My father invited some families over. He wanted me to meet their daughters." Lena's hands slowed on the horse's mane. "Oh." "It was," Caleb said, though his voice held no excitement. "But I don't know if it was right for me." She hesitated. "Did you meet someone you liked?" Caleb thought about that carefully. "They were kind. But no, I didn't feel anything special." Lena nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral. She didn't want him to think she was assuming anything. She didn't want to seem curious, though inside she felt something she didn't understand, a small, quiet ache. Caleb watched her for a moment, studying the way her eyes dropped gently toward the ground. She always did that when she felt unsure. He found the gesture oddly endearing. "Lena," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" She looked up, surprised. "Yes, of course." "Does marriage have to be planned?" Caleb asked. "Does it always have to follow rules and expectations?" Lena blinked, unsure why he was asking her something so personal. but she answered honestly. "I don't know much about marriage," she said gently. "But I think it should feel right. I think it should feel safe and peaceful. I think you should trust the person you choose." Caleb let her words sink in. They felt simple, but true, far more real than the polite conversations he had experienced earlier that evening. "I want that," he said, quietly. Lena smiled softly. "You deserve that." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The barn was silent except for the horses' slow breathing. The warm lantern light made the space feel almost magical. Caleb finally took a slow breath. His father's expectations still weighed on him, but something inside him was shifting, growing clearer, stronger. Standing there beside Lena, he felt something he had not felt all evening. Peace. He saw her gentle movements. He saw the warmth in her eyes. He saw the quiet strength she carried every day, without asking for recognition. And he realized that, without noticing it, he had been drawn to her for a long time. He didn't understand it fully yet, but he knew one thing for certain. No gathering, no perfect family names, and no polished conversations could make him feel what he felt in that quiet barn. He wanted someone who made life feel simple and warm. Someone who made the world calm. Someone who understood him without trying to impress him. And the only person who made him feel that way was Lena. He wasn't ready to say anything aloud, not yet. But in that quiet moment, a new truth settled into his heart. The kind of woman his father wanted for him wasn't the woman he wanted. And the woman he wanted didn't even know she was being considered. He stepped closer, his voice soft. She blinked, unsure of his meaning. "I'm just doing my work." Caleb smiled gently. "You're doing more than you know." Lena didn't understand the depth of his words, not yet, but she felt something warm inside her chest. Caleb turned toward the door, the night breeze brushing against his face. He looked back one more time. His heart had already chosen, even if he didn't admit it aloud. And soon, his father would ask for his final decision. He just didn't know how much that choice, his real choice, would change everything. The morning after Caleb's late visit to the barn, the ranch seemed to move with its usual rhythm. Workers fed the cattle, the sun stretched across the fields, and the sound of hooves echoed through the open spaces. But inside the Reeves house, the atmosphere was different. Harlan Reeves waited for his son with the same question that had been pressing on him for weeks. When Caleb entered the kitchen, he could feel the weight of his father's eyes before a word was spoken. He sat down quietly, unsure how to begin. Harlan wasted no time. "Caleb," he said firmly, "I gave you time to think. You met the girls. Now I need to know your decision." Caleb felt his heart sink. He had known this moment was coming, but that didn't make it easier. He took a slow breath and looked at his father with honesty. "Pa, I can't choose any of them." Harlan frowned. "Why not? They're fine girls from good families. Each one would be a strong partner for you." Caleb shook his head gently. "They're good people, but I didn't feel a connection. It wouldn't be right." Harlan leaned back in his chair, studying his son. "Then, who do you feel a connection with?" For a moment, Caleb hesitated. He knew that once he spoke, everything would change. He knew the words would surprise his father, maybe even disappoint him. But he couldn't lie. "There is someone," Caleb said softly. Harlan's brows lifted. "Who?" Caleb met his father's eyes. "Lena, the stable girl." The room fell silent, as if even the air didn't know how to respond. Harlan stared at his son in disbelief. "Lena," he repeated, almost unable to say the name. "The orphan girl who works in the barns? The one with no family? No land? No connections?" Caleb nodded quietly. "Yes." Harlan stood up, pacing a small circle. "Caleb, you can't be serious. She's not suitable. She doesn't come from a ranching family. She doesn't have a background that fits this life." "She is part of this life," Caleb replied gently. She works harder than most. She understands this ranch better than many of the girls you want me to choose. And she brings peace to me." Harlan shook his head. "Peace won't run a ranch. Kindness will," Caleb said simply. "Dedication will. And she has both." Harlan rubbed his forehead, frustrated but also confused. He had expected resistance. But not this. "Son, I'm not judging her. She is a good worker. But a marriage is more than kindness. The ranch needs a partner who brings strength to the future. Someone who can speak to families, manage events, build relationships. Lena isn't prepared for that." Caleb's voice softened. "She could be, if given a chance." Harlan stopped pacing and looked at his son with concern. "Caleb, you're thinking with your heart, not your head." Caleb met his gaze evenly. "Maybe for once, that's what I need to do." Harlan let out a long breath, shaking his head as he sank back into his chair. "You're making a mistake." Caleb didn't argue. He knew his father believed he was protecting him. But he also knew the decision wasn't his father's to make anymore. Meanwhile, Lena continued her daily chores, unaware of the conversation happening in the house. She brushed the horses, cleaned the stalls, replaced water buckets, every task done with quiet care. But she sensed something different among the workers that day. There were whispers, glances, and murmurs that made her uncomfortable. She wasn't sure why, but she felt like they were talking about something she wasn't supposed to know. When Caleb entered the barn later that morning, the whispers grew louder. A few workers exchanged curious looks, and Lena felt her cheeks warm with confusion. She quickly turned away and focused on brushing a horse, hoping no one noticed her discomfort. Caleb approached her slowly. "Lena," he said gently. She turned, surprised by the softness in his voice. "Good morning," she whispered, unsure why her heart suddenly beat a little faster. "Can we talk?" Caleb asked. Her stomach tightened. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," he said quickly. "Not at all. I just need to tell you something." Lena nodded, though she felt nervous. They stepped outside the barn, where the morning breeze brushed softly against their clothes. Caleb took a careful breath. "Lena, my father asked me to choose a bride." Her eyes dropped instantly. "Yes. I assumed that. It makes sense. I didn't choose any of the girls he introduced me to," he continued gently. She looked up, her expression curious. "Why not? They come from good families. They're well prepared." Caleb smiled slightly. "Maybe, but I didn't feel anything real." Lena stayed silent, unsure where he was going with this. Then Caleb spoke the words that changed everything. "I chose you." At first, she didn't understand. She thought she heard him wrong. She blinked, her breath catching. "Me," she whispered. "Caleb, you can't choose me." "Why not?" he asked softly. She shook her head, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm just a worker here. I don't have a family name or land. I don't have the education those girls have. I don't belong in your world." "You belong in my world," he said gently. "I feel calm with you. I trust you. I see your strength, even when others don't." Lena took a step back, overwhelmed. "Caleb, I can't be the reason you fight with your father. I know he wants the best for you." "Lena, you are the best for me," he said firmly. Her eyes softened, her heart warming at his words, but she still felt the weight of doubt. "Your father won't approve." Caleb knew she was right. He doesn't approve right now, but maybe he will, once he understands. Lena looked down at her hands, feeling torn between her heart and her fear. She had never imagined someone like Caleb would look at her with such honesty. It was both a blessing and a burden. She didn't want to cause trouble. She didn't want people whispering about her. She didn't want to be the reason Caleb struggled with his family. "Caleb," she said softly, "I don't want to hurt your life." "You won't," he answered gently. "You're a light in it. Lena's eyes glistened slightly, though she blinked away the emotion. She had lived so long, feeling unnoticed, that Caleb's words were almost too deep to accept. At that moment, Harlan appeared at the barn entrance. He had come searching for Caleb, but when he saw the two talking, he paused. He didn't approach right away. Instead, he watched from a short distance, his expression tight. He could see the honesty in Caleb's posture, the quiet worry on Lena's face. And for a brief moment, something in him softened. But only for a moment. His protective instincts quickly returned. "Caleb," Harlan called out, his voice steady but firm. Caleb turned, his expression calm but determined. "Pa." Harlan stepped closer. His eyes moved to Lena briefly, then back to his son. "We need to talk." Caleb nodded, then turned to Lena. "I'll find you later." Lena gave a small nod and stepped back into the barn, her heart trembling with mixed emotions. As Caleb walked toward his father, Harlan spoke with a mixture of frustration and concern. "You're making choices that could change everything. Are you sure this is what you want?" Caleb lifted his chin. "Yes." Harlan studied him for a long moment. Caleb no longer looked like a boy, needing guidance. He looked like a man, standing firm in what he believed. Something in that realization gave Harlan pause. He sighed deeply. "If this is truly your choice, then I will need time. A lot of time." Caleb nodded. "That's all I ask." Inside the barn, Lena pressed her hand gently against a stall door, trying to calm her racing heart. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know whether the rancher would ever accept her. All she knew was that Caleb had chosen her not out of duty, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And for the first time in her life, she felt seen not for what she lacked, but for who she was. The days that followed Caleb's decision brought a quiet tension across the ranch. Word spread quickly, carried in low whispers between workers, and echoed softly in the curious looks people exchanged. The ranch was a place where news traveled faster than horses, and Caleb choosing Lena, the orphan stable girl, was news no one expected. Some workers were surprised, some were confused, and a few simply shrugged. But others whispered things that made Lena's heart tighten, even if the words never fully reached her ears. She sensed the shift in people's eyes. She felt the weight of their questions, without hearing them aloud. Through it all, Lena moved through her tasks with her usual quiet strength. Though inside she felt nervous. She cared for the horses, brushed their coats, refreshed their water, and swept the barn floor. She tried to pretend everything was normal. But the world around her felt different, like a path she wasn't sure she was allowed to walk. Caleb visited the barn often during those days. Not to pressure her or to pull her into long conversations, but simply to check on her, to make sure she wasn't overwhelmed by the gossip or the curious stares. Whenever he walked in, Lena felt her worries soften. She didn't understand how he had such an effect on her. Maybe it was his calm presence. Maybe it was his warm smile. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in her life, someone had chosen her simply because they saw her value, not her background, not her appearance, not what she lacked, but what she carried quietly inside. One afternoon, Lena was brushing the mare outside the barn when Caleb approached with a gentle step. "How are you doing today?" he asked softly. Lena hesitated. "I'm all right. Just thinking." "About?" he asked. "Everything," she admitted in a whisper. "Your father, the ranch, the workers, what they might be saying." Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. "People always talk. They talked when my mother first came to this ranch too. It's how people deal with change. But talk doesn't shape the truth." Lena looked down, brushing the mare's mane with slow strokes. "I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Caleb said firmly. Lena's eyes softened, though uncertainty still lingered in them. But your father. He hasn't said anything to me. He needs time, Caleb said gently. He's learning to understand something he didn't expect. Lena wanted to believe him, she truly did. But deep inside, she carried years of feeling unworthy. Years of moving from place to place, never belonging anywhere. It was hard to let go of the fear that one wrong step might undo everything. 2 evenings later, Harlan finally came to the barn. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Lena was finishing her chores, closing the last stall door, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw him, the rancher, tall and proud. But his face looked more thoughtful than strict that night. "Lena," Harlan said with a calm, steady tone she hadn't expected. She froze for a moment, unsure if she should speak first or wait. "Yes, sir?" she said quietly. Harlan stepped closer, his boots slow and measured on the barn floor. He looked around briefly, as if taking in the quiet world she worked in every day. "I owe you a conversation," he said. Lena's heart beat faster. She nodded gently. Harlan leaned against the stall door, his posture relaxed but serious. "Caleb cares for you. That much is clear." Lena lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond. "I never meant to come between you both." "Troun." "You didn't," he said softly. "Caleb is a grown man. His decisions are his own." Lena looked up, surprised by the calm in his voice. Harlan sighed as if letting go of something heavy. "When Caleb told me he chose you, I'll be honest, I wasn't ready for it. I imagined his future a certain way. I thought he needed someone with land, a strong family, connections, someone who could help the ranch grow." Lena swallowed, feeling a familiar ache of inadequacy. "I don't have any of that." "No," Harlan said gently. "You don't. But that doesn't mean you don't have worth." She blinked, caught off guard by his honesty. "When I watched you these last few days," he continued, "I saw something I hadn't seen before. I saw how the horses respond to you. I saw how you work without ever being asked twice. I saw how you move quietly through this ranch, yet everything you do makes a difference." His voice softened even more. "That kind of dedication can't be bought. It can't be taught. It comes from the heart." Lena felt something warm stir inside her chest, something she hadn't felt from anyone but Caleb being seen. Harlan continued, "Caleb isn't choosing you out of impulse. He's choosing you because your presence brings steadiness to him, because you make him better." Lena lowered her gaze again, quietly touched. "But," Harlan said, and she lifted her eyes slowly. "Before I give my full blessing, I need to ask you something." Lena nodded, bracing herself. "Do you care for him?" Harlan asked gently. "Truly? Not because he showed you kindness or because life has been hard for you, but because you see him for who he is?" Lena felt her breath tremble for a moment. She looked down at her hands, worn from years of work, then up again with soft, honest eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I care for him more than I know how to explain. Not because he chose me, not because he made me feel noticed. I care for him because he is good and thoughtful, and he sees people deeply. I care for him because he brings calm into my life too." Her voice stayed steady, truthful. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I would stand beside him in whatever comes." Harlan listened in silence, and something gentle settled in his eyes. A long moment passed before he nodded slowly. "Then I believe you," he said. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the stall door as if grounding himself. "I may not understand everything right away. I may still worry, but I won't stand in the way of what's real and honest." Lena felt a wave of relief rise through her chest. "You have my blessing," Harlan said softly. The words were simple, but to Lena, they felt like a doorway opening, a doorway she never thought she'd be allowed to walk through. Just then, Caleb appeared at the barn entrance. He had been searching for his father, unaware of the conversation taking place. When he saw the two of them standing close and calm, he paused. Harlan turned to him, giving him a small smile, the kind that carried acceptance. "You chose well, son." Caleb's eyes softened with gratitude. He looked at Lena, his expression warm and full of quiet hope. The ranch, once filled with whispers and doubts, slowly settled into a new rhythm. Over the next weeks, people saw Lena differently. She wasn't just the stable girl anymore. She was someone trusted by the Reeves family, someone who carried grace in her steps and kindness in her heart. Lena still worked hard, still wore simple clothes, still moved with gentle humility. But now, she walked with a sense of belonging she never had before. Caleb and Lena spent more time together, not rushed, not forced, but naturally. They talked in the quiet of the barn, walked along the fields at sunset, and shared simple moments that built a deep connection. Harlan, watching from a distance, slowly grew fond of the young woman who had surprised them all. He saw the way she supported Caleb, how she balanced gentleness with strength, how she respected the land as deeply as she respected people. One evening, months later, as the sky glowed with soft pink and golden light, Caleb stood beside Lena at the fence overlooking the fields. "This place looks different now," Lena said softly. "It's the same ranch," Caleb replied. "But my future looks different." She smiled gently. "And does it look good?" Caleb looked at her with warm, honest eyes. "It looks perfect, with you in it." Lena felt her heart swell, peaceful, steady, real. The ranch entered a new season, not just in the weather, but in life. And for the first time, Lena Carter felt not like a visitor, or a worker, or a quiet shadow in the background. She felt like she truly belonged, not because she had land, not because she had a family name, but because someone chose her with a full and honest heart, and because she chose him back. The future stretched wide before them, strong, warm, and filled with possibilities.